When I asked about the family trip, my dad said, "It's just too expensive to include you this year." Then I saw their beach photos at the luxury villa I paid for. So I booked a flight, showed up with Unannounced and walked in. My brother gasped, "What are you doing here?" I just smiled and said, "Checking in. You've got 10 minutes to pack." I, 32M, stared at my phone screen, feeling something cold settle in my chest. There they were, grinning on a pristine beach, cocktails in hand. Mom in her ridiculous sun hat. Dad doing his signature thumbs-up pose. My brother and his wife looking tanned and relaxed. Even the kids were there, building sand castles that looked suspiciously expensive, the kind only five-star resorts bothered with. The villa in the background stopped me cold. White columns, infinity pool, those distinctive blue shutters I'd personally picked out 6 months ago. My villa. The one I'd purchased as an investment property in Costa Rica. The one I'd told Dad about during our last dinner together, mentioning I was looking for property managers. 3 weeks earlier, I'd called Dad about the annual family trip. We'd been doing them for 15 years, ever since I landed my first real job out of college. The tradition started small, just a lake house rental, but as my career in tech took off, the trips got bigger. I never minded. Family was family. Dad had sighed heavily when I asked about dates. He said money was tight this year, that they were thinking of skipping it entirely. When I offered to help cover costs like always, he got defensive. He said they didn't want to burden me anymore, that I'd done enough over the years. He said maybe they'd do something small, just the immediate family, nothing fancy. Keep it local. I'd felt guilty for weeks. I'd been working insane hours, traveling constantly for work. Maybe I hadn't been present enough. Maybe they felt like I was too busy for them. Now I understood. They didn't want to burden me because they were already stealing from me. I scrolled through more photos. My brother had tagged the location like an idiot. Villa Paraiso, Manuel Antonio. My property. I checked my property management account with shaking hands. There it was. A 2-week booking under my father's name, listed as owner's family, with 100% discount applied. The notes section said the authorization came from me via email. I never sent that email. I called my property manager, a efficient woman named Sophia I'd hired specifically for her no-nonsense approach. She answered on the second ring, and I asked about the booking. She sounded surprised, saying she'd received an email from my account 3 months ago authorizing the family stay. She offered to forward it to me. The email arrived 30 seconds later. It was from my account, but I never wrote it. The writing style was all wrong. Too casual, too many exclamation points. I checked my sent folder. Nothing. Someone had accessed my email, sent the authorization, then deleted it from sent items. I sat back in my office chair, my mind racing. Only 3 people had my email password. My assistant, who I'd trust with my life. My girlfriend, who was currently on a work assignment in Singapore. And my brother, who I'd given access to last year when he needed to send some documents while I was in a dead zone in rural Japan. My brother, the same one currently posting photos from my property. I called Sophia back and asked if she could tell me who'd been communicating with her about the booking. She said mostly my father, but my brother had called once to ask about extending the stay another week. She'd told him that unfortunately there was a paying booking immediately after, so it wasn't possible. A paying booking. My first real rental. A tech executive from Seattle paying premium rates for 3 weeks. That reservation had made me $12,000. I asked Sophia when the family was checking out. She said tomorrow morning, but they'd been pushing to stay longer. I thanked her and hung up. Then I opened my laptop and started digging. My email security logs showed the unauthorized access clear as day. My brother's IP address, from his home, the same day that authorization email was sent. I checked my banking apps, my investment accounts, anything he might have touched. Everything else seemed clean, but I changed every password anyway. The betrayal sat in my throat like broken glass. This wasn't just about the villa. It was about the lies. The performance. Dad's heavy sighs about money troubles. Mom's apologetic texts about how they'd miss me on the trip. My brother's sympathetic call where he'd said he understood I was too busy anyway, that they'd take lots of photos for me. They had, just not the kind they'd planned. I looked at my calendar. I had a board meeting tomorrow that I couldn't miss, but after that, nothing that couldn't be handled remotely. I opened a travel site and found a flight to San Jose leaving tomorrow night, arriving early the following morning. Then a quick puddle jumper to Capos. I'd be at the villa by noon. I booked it. Business class. One way. I wasn't sure when I'd be coming back. Then I called my lawyer. I needed to understand my options. Could I evict them? Was it trespassing if they gained access through fraud? He listened to everything, asked a few clarifying questions, then told me that technically, since the property manager had been deceived by what appeared to be legitimate authorization, it existed in a gray area. But since I was the owner, I absolutely had the right to terminate their stay, especially given the circumstances. He offered to make some calls, but I told him I'd handle it personally. Some things needed to be done face to face. The next day crawled by. The board meeting felt surreal. I sat there discussing quarterly projections and market expansion while my mind kept drifting to that beach photo. My family, in my villa, celebrating my absence. I'd always been the responsible one, the one who made it. My brother had bounced between jobs, made questionable decisions, borrowed money that never quite got paid back. But he was family, so I helped. I always helped. I'd co-signed his car lease. I'd hired him at my company once, though that had ended badly when he stopped showing up. I'd paid for Dad's medical bills when his insurance fell through. And this was how they repaid me. The flight was smooth. I didn't sleep. I kept checking my phone, half expecting someone to notice my absence, to reach out, to maybe feel guilty. Nothing. Just more photos. My niece eating gourmet ice cream. My nephew learning to surf. My mother's text to the family group chat about how blessed they were to find such an amazing deal on this villa. A deal. That's what I'd become. A deal. I landed in San Jose at 6 in the morning, caught the connecting flight, and was in a rental car by 9. The drive to Manuel Antonio took about an hour through winding mountain roads. The Pacific glittered in the distance. Under different circumstances, I might have appreciated the beauty. I pulled up to Villa Paraiso at 11:45. It looked even better than the photos I'd seen during the purchase process. White stucco walls, terracotta roof, lush tropical gardens. I'd bought it for $500,000, a steal for the location. Sophia had assured me it would pay for itself within 5 years with the right management. Or it would have, if my family hadn't decided to treat it as their personal vacation home. I could hear them before I saw them. Laughter from the pool area. Music playing. The clink of glasses. I walked around the side of the villa, my shoes crunching on the gravel path. The scene was exactly what I'd imagined. Mom and Dad on loungers under an umbrella. My brother in the pool with his kids. His wife reading a book on a float. All of them perfectly content in their theft. I walked through the gate. My brother saw me first. He was midway through tossing his daughter in the air when he froze, his eyes going wide. She splashed down giggling, not noticing his sudden paralysis. He asked what I was doing here, his voice strangled. Everyone turned. The music kept playing, some reggae track that suddenly felt absurd. I smiled. It didn't reach my eyes. I told them I was checking in, that they had 10 minutes to pack. The silence stretched. Then everyone started talking at once. Dad asked what I meant, trying to sound authoritative but mostly achieving confused. Mom said this was ridiculous, that I was being dramatic. My brother's wife muttered something about hospitality. Only my brother stayed quiet, his face draining of color. He knew. He understood exactly what I'd discovered. I let them talk themselves out. Then I said, very calmly, that this was my property, that I'd never authorized their stay, and that someone had fraudulently accessed my email to set up this little vacation. I looked directly at my brother when I said that last part. Dad tried to bluster. He said I'd offered to let them use it, that we'd discussed it months ago. I pulled out my phone and offered to play the recording of our last conversation, the one where he'd said the family trip was too expensive this year. I'd been recording important calls for work purposes, a habit that had just paid unexpected dividends. Mom started crying. She said they just wanted one nice family vacation, that we never spent time together anymore. I reminded her that I'd tried to join, that I'd offered to pay, and that they'd explicitly lied to exclude me. My brother finally spoke up. He said he'd made a mistake, that he'd thought I wouldn't mind, that the villa was just sitting empty anyway. I asked him if that's why he'd deleted the email from my sent folder and covered his tracks. If it was all so innocent, why the deception? He didn't have an answer for that. I told them again. 10 minutes. Pack whatever they could carry. The rest could be shipped later. I was being generous with the timeline. Dad tried a different approach. He said we could talk about this like adults, that there was no need to ruin everyone's vacation over a misunderstanding. I told him the only misunderstanding was my belief that my family actually respected me. The next 10 minutes were chaos. My brother's kids crying, not understanding why they had to leave. His wife throwing accusations about how I'd always thought I was better than them. Mom oscillating between tears and anger. Dad trying to negotiate, to mediate, to somehow salvage this. I stood by the pool unmoved. I'd spent years being the solution to their problems, the bank they could always draw from, the safety net that never said no. And they'd repaid me with fraud and lies. When the 10 minutes were up, I told them to leave. My brother tried one last time to explain, to apologize, to somehow make it right. I asked him if he'd planned to ever tell me, or if he'd just hoped I'd never find out. His silence was answer enough. They left. Sophia had called me earlier to say she'd arranged for a van to take them to a hotel in town. I'd authorized it and paid for 3 nights while they sorted out flights. I wasn't completely heartless, but I was done being a doormat. After they were gone, I walked through the villa. It was a mess. Dishes piled in the sink. Wet towels everywhere. Empty bottles on the counters. They'd lived here for nearly 2 weeks like they owned it, because they'd thought they could get away with it. I started cleaning. It felt therapeutic. Every dish I washed, every surface I wiped, felt like reclaiming something stolen. My phone buzzed constantly. Texts from Mom begging me to reconsider, saying I was tearing the family apart. Messages from Dad trying to be reasonable, suggesting we split the cost of their stay retroactively. My brother sent a long rambling apology that somehow still managed to blame me for being absent, for making them feel like they had to deceive me to spend time together. I didn't respond to any of them. That evening, I sat on the terrace watching the sunset over the Pacific. The villa was clean. The peace was absolute. And I felt, for the first time in weeks, clear-headed. My girlfriend called from Singapore. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, then said something that stuck with me. She said that people will take as much as you let them take, and that sometimes love means having boundaries even when it hurts. She was right. I'd enabled this. Not the fraud, but the mentality behind it. The belief that my success was their resource. That my money, my property, my time, were all communal goods to be distributed as they saw fit. Update 1. I stayed at the villa for 2 weeks. Sophia was surprised but pleased. She said it was good for the owner to experience the property firsthand, to understand what guests would experience. She wasn't wrong. The place was spectacular. During those 2 weeks, my phone never stopped. Family members I hadn't heard from in years suddenly had opinions about my cruelty. Cousins texted about forgiveness. My uncle called to lecture me about respecting my elders. My aunt sent a long email about how family was forever and property was temporary. Funny how none of them had ever called when I was paying for Dad's medical bills or co-signing my brother's lease. I did respond to one message. My brother sent a text on day for asking if we could talk. I told him we could, but only if he was ready to have an honest conversation. He called an hour later. He admitted everything. The email hack had been his idea. He'd told Dad and Mom about it after the fact, and they'd agreed to go along with it. He said he'd justified it to himself because I had so much and they had so little, because the villa was just sitting there, because I wouldn't have minded if I'd known. I asked him why he didn't just ask me directly then. He got quiet, then admitted he'd been afraid I'd say no, that I'd been pulling back from the family lately, setting more boundaries. He said it felt like I was abandoning them. I told him that setting boundaries wasn't abandonment. That saying no sometimes didn't mean I loved them less. That I'd been drowning in their expectations and needs for years, and I'd finally started learning to swim. He didn't like that answer. He said I'd changed, that success had made me cold. I told him that maybe I had changed, but at least I hadn't changed into someone who stole from family. We didn't speak again after that call. Mom tried a different approach. She showed up at the villa on day 7. I'd been expecting it. Sophia had called to warn me that someone was asking about my schedule. I told her to let Mom come. She arrived in a taxi, looking smaller than I remembered. The crying had been real. The guilt was written all over her face. She asked if we could talk, and I invited her in. We sat on the same terrace where I'd watched that first sunset. She told me about how hard things had been lately. Dad's retirement wasn't stretching as far as they'd hoped. My brother's latest job had fallen through. They'd felt desperate, scared, and when he'd suggested using the villa, it had seemed harmless. I asked her why she'd lied to me about the trip being too expensive. Why not just ask to use the villa? She said she was ashamed. Ashamed that they needed my help again. Ashamed that after everything I'd done, they still couldn't stand on their own feet. She said the lie had felt kinder than admitting they were still dependent on me. I understood that, more than she knew. But understanding didn't erase what they'd done. I told her I wasn't cutting them off completely, but things were going to change. No more automatic bailouts. No more open-ended access to my resources. If they needed help, they'd have to ask directly and accept that sometimes the answer would be no. She cried again, but she nodded. She said she understood, that they'd betrayed my trust and had to earn it back. She asked how long I thought that would take. I told her honestly that I didn't know. Maybe months. Maybe years. Maybe never. Trust wasn't a light switch. She left that afternoon. I drove her to the airport myself. Before she got out of the car, she told me she was proud of me, that I'd built an incredible life, and that she was sorry they tried to take it from me instead of celebrating it with me. It was the most honest thing she'd said in months. Update 2. I extended my stay at the villa by another week. Work was understanding. My assistant juggled meetings, and my girlfriend arranged to route back through Costa Rica on her way home from Singapore. We spent 5 days at the villa together, and it was the first time I'd truly relaxed in years. She asked me what I was going to do about the family situation long term. I told her I was still figuring it out, but that I knew one thing for certain. I was done carrying them. She supported that. She'd seen how drained I'd been, how every family crisis had become my crisis, how their poor planning had become my emergency. She'd watched me sacrifice weekends and vacations to solve problems that weren't mine to solve. We talked about the future, about boundaries and expectations, about building a life that was ours, not just an extension of my family's needs. It felt like permission to want something for myself. When I finally flew home, I felt different. Lighter somehow. The anger had burned through, leaving something clearer behind. My brother tried to reach out again, another long apology text. This time I read it. He took more responsibility than before, admitted that he'd justified the theft because of his own jealousy and resentment. He said seeing me succeed while he struggled had created a bitterness he'd never dealt with properly, and he'd taken it out on me in the worst possible way. He said he'd started therapy, that his wife had given him an ultimatum after the villa incident. Either he dealt with his issues or she was done. He'd chosen therapy. I didn't respond immediately, but I didn't delete the message either. Dad sent an email 2 weeks after I got back. It was shorter, more formal than his usual style. He apologized for his role in the deception and for trying to justify it afterward. He said he'd been so focused on keeping the peace in the family that he'd forgotten about keeping his integrity. He attached a payment plan. They couldn't afford to pay me back for the full 2 weeks at market rate, but he wanted to try. Small monthly installments over 2 years. It wasn't about the money for me, but I appreciated the gesture. It meant he understood this wasn't something he could just smooth over with words. I accepted the payment plan, not because I needed the money, but because they needed to do it. They needed to understand that actions had consequences, even within families. Especially within families. Update 3. It's been 3 months now. The villa is doing great. Sophia has it booked solid through the next season. That tech executive from Seattle left a glowing review and referred 3 of his colleagues. The property is already turning a profit. I've talked to my brother twice since the incident. Brief conversations, surface level, but civil. He's still in therapy. He sent me a book his therapist recommended about family dynamics and financial codependency. I actually read it. Some of it hit uncomfortably close to home. Mom and I text occasionally. Nothing deep, just checking in. Dad's been making the payments on schedule. Not a single one has been late. My girlfriend moved in with me last month. We're talking about getting engaged. She wants to get married at the villa, which feels right somehow. Taking something that started with betrayal and turning it into something beautiful. I've learned something through all of this. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're not about withholding love or being cruel. They're about teaching people how to treat you, about respecting yourself enough to say enough is enough. My family had learned they could take from me endlessly because I'd never shown them otherwise. I'd confused generosity with doormat behavior, love with unlimited access. The villa incident forced a reckoning that was probably years overdue. Would I have preferred to learn this lesson differently? Obviously, but I can't change what happened. I can only decide what comes next. The truth is, I miss them. I miss the family dinners and the inside jokes and the feeling of belonging somewhere. But I don't miss who I had to be to maintain that. I don't miss the exhaustion, the resentment, the feeling of being valued only for what I could provide. My brother called last week. Not to apologize again or to justify, just to talk. He told me about his new job, A real one this time with actual stability. He asked about my work, about my girlfriend, about the villa bookings. It was almost normal. At the end of the call, he said something that stuck with me. He said that losing access to me had forced him to figure out how to solve his own problems, and that he'd needed that push even though he'd hated me for it at the time. He said he was becoming someone he was actually proud of. I told him I was proud of him too. I meant it. I don't know if we'll ever get back to where we were. Maybe that's okay. Maybe where we were wasn't actually that healthy. Maybe this new distance, this respect, is better than the old closeness built on me constantly giving and them constantly taking. I'm going back to the villa next month. Just me this time. Sophia wants to go over some renovation ideas, and I want to see the place during peak season. My girlfriend can't make it, work obligations, but she'll meet me there for the last weekend. I'm looking forward to it. To sitting on that terrace again. To watching the sunset over the Pacific. To being in a place that's mine, that I built, that I don't have to share unless I choose to. The funny thing about betrayal is that sometimes it's the wake-up call you didn't know you needed. My family stealing from me forced me to examine why I'd made myself so stealable in the first place. It pushed me to value myself as more than just a resource. I'm not that person anymore. The one who said yes to everything, who absorbed everyone's problems, who lit himself on fire to keep others warm. That version of me died in Costa Rica, and someone stronger rose from the ashes.